Hey guys, what's going on? Jacob here. So last time we learned how to create, read, update, and delete data inside SQL databases. Those are going to be your keys whenever you're working on a database. But today we're going to take a larger look at SQL databases, the tables inside of them, and how they can all be connected to do really cool things. Today will be less code and more higher level thinking. And this is something that might take you a while to get, and that's perfectly fine. It honestly took me a while for this to click for me, but now it's like second nature. So let's get started. So the first item that we need to cover is the primary key. This is going to be the column that holds a unique value for the row and identifies the row. This is usually some sort of product ID, team ID, customer ID, client ID, or the like. Setting up the primary key is super simple. In MySQL, which you'll likely be using the most, you can set the primary key after you define the columns with primary key and then the column that you want to be the primary key. In other SQL products, you can set the primary key in line when you define the column. Other than that, that's all the setup you need for primary keys. The unique constraint isn't as important for table relationships as the primary key, but it can be important if you need another column to have unique values. Like primary keys in MySQL, you define the unique columns after you define all the columns with unique, and then set the columns to be unique. With other products, you can define the unique columns when you define the column. Moving back to primary keys, it's always best that your primary key is the first column in the table that's an integer and it auto increments. Setting up the column to do this isn't that hard. Simply define the column name, set it to be an integer, and then add auto increment. Then define it as the primary key. Now when you add a row to the table, simply use empty quotation marks as the value for that column. SQL will increment that value by 1 from the row before it and set that as that value. And now the row has an ID. Now we get to the higher level thinking. We'll talk about how to do this in the code next time, so don't really worry about how the database and table connections actually happen. Instead, we're going to talk abstractly about how tables connect with each other. So let's say we have a sports database with teams, players, games, and player individual stats for each game. How are we going to connect each of those tables? Well, using the primary keys that we just talked about. Each table will have a primary key. Team ID for teams, player ID for players, game ID for games, and game stats ID for the game stats table. We'll be able to connect the team and player tables together by having a team ID column in the players table and then filling that value with a team ID for each player. Similarly, we'll have game ID and player ID columns in a game stats table so that each game stat can be associated with a game and a player. And then in the game table, we'll have a game away ID column and a game home ID column so that we can connect the home team and the away team to that game. See, it's not that hard. Sometimes when you're first starting out or when things get very complex, it's easier to write out each of the tables and their columns and then draw lines to show the connections between each table. So here's an example with the tables that we were talking about before. Well, that's all for today. Next time we'll talk about how to do this in code with joins. In the meantime, do you have any questions over what we went over today? If so, be sure to leave them down in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. But until next time, good luck and happy coding.